We also got honey, we've got herbs, and we've got everything in here. The eggs up at the top, there's duck eggs and chicken eggs, raw, freeze-dried. So with those, we just crack them into a giant bowl, scramble them up, and pour it into the freeze dryer. And then it comes out like a crystally looking powder. It's sparkly, like glitter. But when you add water to it, the whole texture of the scrambled egg comes back.
Wow.
You can't freeze dry whole eggs because the egg white kind of basically just floats away into it becomes so like
interesting. It's not like dense enough or
it
something.
doesn't work. You have to mix it together to make it work right. And then the scrambled ones, it's better if you undercook them a little and then freeze dry them, and then they come out better than if they are really cooked.
How do you know how much water to add to eat them?
I Google it.
There's a ratio.
There's a ratio, and I think we wrote it on the top of the jars because we looked it up when we first did it, and it's like it tells you how much to put, like a tablespoon of powder and so much water makes an egg. So, and when we did these, we wrote down how many eggs approximately were in each jar.
So that's all
it.
On the freeze drying, there's a little bit more math involved for
when you need to use it. But like for onions, it's like so if we wanted to use this whole jar of onions, which we probably wouldn't. Hey, don't do that, buddy. We take the lid off. There's a little oxygen absorber in there too, so we'll take that off the top, and then we pour boiling water into the jar and let it sit and let them sit probably 15 minutes, and then we strain it out and you cook the food. And that works. So these are sweet potatoes.
How many
broccoli.
Onions is in there?
They're true to size. So
yeah, they stay about the same size.
Two tops, maybe.
That's probably 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on how big your onions are too. But the nice thing about onions is that like this is a partial jar, and I didn't have to reseal that or anything. I just put the lid back on, and they don't go bad. Like
because it's freeze dried.
Well, because it's freeze dried, but also because it's onions. Oh. Now something like tomatoes, like if I open this jar of tomato slices, those are freeze dried.
From last year.
Yeah, from last year. And if I open that jar and expose them to the moisture that's in the air, they will get squishy and gummy pretty quickly. But they'll, you can eat them for a meal, but you couldn't just put the lid back on and call it good. Same thing with the eggs. You have to reseal those.
So you freeze dry it and put it in that jar with an oxygen absorber.
Yeah,
there's nothing else.
There's one here.
And that oxygen absorber pulls out any remaining oxygen and moisture, and then that's it.
And the other thing we do with some of them in our... What are you doing, dude? We have a vacuum sealer attachment for our food saver. So, like, you put this, there's a hose that comes out of the food saver, and you plug it into this.
And it pulls the air,
and it sucks all the air out. So if you do that and an oxygen absorber, it's a lot better for long-term storage. But if we're just doing, like, we're going to eat this over the winter, I'm going to do one or the other.
Got it. But if you want long-term, like 10 years...
If you really want long-term, you don't put them in glass because you're exposing them to light. So... The really long term are in the Mylar bags.
Got it.
With the oxygen absorber.
Okay.
And that's supposed to be better for
a vapor sealed 5-gallon bucket, like a bucket like that maybe would work too.
Yeah, lots of people they make Mylar bags that fit into those buckets too, so you can seal it and then put it in, and it's extra fancy. Yeah, we've got that's all honey.
Honey. This is from your bees. Neat.
And there's a big section of honey here taking up my tomatoes. This is the dark one, right?
Yeah, and that's more cloverish.
Clover versus flowers.
Early spring. Okay.
Sometimes we get, if you get a sale on something, like we came across a whole bunch of organic lemons. Snatched them up, and she freeze dried.
I actually got them for free. But in limes, this is lime juice.
So you juiced them.
Well, I didn't freeze dry them.
Well, it's not freeze
canned
dried.
them.
Sorry.
Yeah, we juiced the limes and lemons and canned them.
Freeze dried zest, right?
I did. This is freeze dried lemon zest.
Wow.
It's magical.
Wow.
It was a lot of organic lemons to make that, and then we also have one of lime zest that's freeze dried.
Interesting. So a freeze dryer is a pretty. I mean.
And freeze dry.
It's a great modern technology.
It is really neat, and like lots of people really worry about opening and closing freeze dried stuff, and that isn't as a concern with like the tomatoes, like we talked about, and the squash and a few other things. But like our peppers, things that are herbs that you'd usually use more like, or that are drier anyway. Onions, the peppers, the celery, and the herbs. Like these are freeze dried parsley, basil, dill, all of that, which taste like fresh. They're amazing. But you can open the jar, use what you need, close the jar. As long as you seal it back up, it keeps the same way a regular dried herb would.
Wow.
When I make a bunch of chicken broth, I'll put it on the stove. I'll get a little bit of the freeze-dried basil and oregano and just drop just the tiniest bit into the broth to make soup, and it's
like you're putting fresh herbs.
Yeah.
Wow. And so what's the difference between the like a dried herb and then the freeze-dried? You notice a difference in the quality.
So
in the color and in the flavor.
when
Interesting.
you take food out of the freeze dryer, you find just the shell of the food with no moisture on it left on your trays where you put it in. The chamber of the freeze dryer is covered in ice, and it's basically pure water. So when that ice melts and you drain it out, sometimes it'll have a little bit of a smell of the food it came out from, but for the most part, it is completely. Yeah, smell this.
Smell this. That's freeze-dried basil from last year.
Crazy. Whoa.
So it's
All
been
it's doing is removing the water.
Right.
When you dehydrate, you're actually losing some of the oils.
Yeah, you're losing
and the things the actual flavor.
Yeah,
and nutrients.
Brown
You're
and
losing
it doesn't-
nutrients.
Yeah,
That
because like,
means-
can you see how green that is? This is freeze-dried parsley. But like if you dry parsley,
it's the same color as when you harvested it.
Yeah,
But yeah, when it's
it's the
dried,
same color.
it loses color.
I have some in here. I'm sure that's not
It's actually
Correct. Yes.
ounce for ounce, it's way more flavorful.
You don't have to
Yes.
use as
Grab a
much.
jar of strawberries. These, when we did vacuum seal these, so if you hear it,
Oh wow.
try one.
Oh my gosh.
Somewhere in here I have
all
this
the-
one.
Whoa.
All the flavor. The dehydrated one, you're going to lose a lot of that flavor.
And it's gonna be harder to chew and like amazing.
That is so. I mean, who needs to buy candy when you got this?
Exactly.
So for people who are trying to decide, because freeze dryers aren't cheap, they're a couple grand, aren't they?
At least.
At least.
Like
The
a
large
few
size
grand.
one we've got is probably closer to 3,500.
Yeah. So it's a big investment. It's a big investment. But I mean, man.
it has completely changed the way we
Yeah.
do things in here.
The water
Pressure canned.
Pressure can. Okay.
Green beans. Same varieties of beans, freeze dried.
Oh my gosh.
They look because this is this like
Yeah.
washed out color is this purple
cooked.
and white. And I mean those are pre-cooked and ready to go, but
Right.
what we do with these is we pour the boiling water in the jar, let it sit. Sometimes we have to dump it and try and add more if it cools off too fast. And then drain it out and we fry them like stir fry, cook them. You can steam them, you can do whatever. But they taste like fresh. Like it's
a little.
Yeah. What happens?
it's just if you get them
better than-
hydrated the right amount, the texture is just like the fresh. If you don't
Really?
quite get them hydrated enough, it tastes more like a thawed frozen bean, like with a
Interesting.
kind of like a little bit tougher.
Whereas these, the texture's never going to be as
The texture's
good.
never gonna. It's always
better in a
mush,
soup or-
basically.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like those. He
Yeah.
grew up on them and likes them. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
these are gross. Then it takes away all the flavor. Though. They even when the texture is not quite right because you can't get the moisture right. Second favorite here, which this we just discovered last year. This is zucchini and yellow summer squash. And if you freeze these and try to cook them, they
Right,
turn
it
to
doesn't-
complete mush.
Right.
They don't work. And we don't have to blanch these either, or the beans, because if you freeze beans, you have to blanch them.
Right,
If
I
you
don't
freeze
like
dry
to do
them,
that.
you don't have to blanch them.
Ah, so there's another benefit.
But these, like, we can do the same thing as long as you hydrate them with hot water and drain it, and then we stir fry them with the beans and stuff, and like the texture is just a little different, but it's the flavor of summer,
As a fun,
and the nutritional value is still there.
That's what I'm noticing
Yes.
because color and flavor is an indication of nutrition
And freeze-dried food keeps more nutritional value than
Yeah.
any other shelf-stable preservation method.
Yep.
So this is beef broth.
freeze dried.
Freeze-dried beef broth.
Oh,
So
okay.
another thing you would have to pressure can that you don't
Right.
have to pressure can if you have a
Right.
freeze dryer, and you just take out what you need. You could make it as strong as you want or butter it down.
and that's probably.
And it's got all the gelatin and
Right.
we didn't skim off any fat on this
Nice.
because when you're pressure canning broth, you have to skim off the fat, so you lose all that.
Oh my gosh.
When
Okay,
you're freeze
yeah.
drying it, you just have to make sure it's really well incorporated, because if the fat is separated, it kind of causes some craziness in the freeze dryer. I have some of them, probably
Wow.
at least, and it.
So you can make it like super concentrated. Make like what that's called, a bouillon, or the that those
Yeah,
things
we
you can buy.
have turkey broth
Yeah.
and chicken and all sorts of stuff in here.
broth.
Yeah, venison. And then
Nice.
this one is goat milk,
Oh, dehydrated
which
milk.
is that
yeah, powdered milk.
powdered
right?
milk,
You're
which
right.
does not
That's a
taste
good
very
one.
good. Like that
Oh, the
goaty
grassy,
flavor.
yeah.
That's what it tastes like. Lots of people say freezing goat milk does the same thing, so I assume it's something to do with that. It doesn't taste like it does fresh. But it's still nice to have. Like,
It's good
we're not
emergency,
gonna drink
food.
it.
That's-
You can't
yeah.
really make cheese out of it. We tried that. It did not taste good either.
Mm-hmm.
But we saved it this year. We were saving that because we were afraid we were gonna have bottle babies or puppies or something like that that we might need to supplement.
That's
and
a
you can
good-
use it for that.
That's smart.
You can use it in baking, and you don't notice the goaty flavor. But We just have a little bit because we don't have that much extra, but we will be trying that with the cow milk and try to
see if
fix the flavor issues whenever we really need to be preserving it. Because lots of people do it, but the goat milk just came out very goaty.
Since freeze drying is just removing all the liquid, or all the not the liquid, the water.
Yeah.
It doesn't remove the liquid; it removes the water.
Just
Which is why you
H2O.
can freeze-dry broth.
So when you go to rehydrate your food, depending on what it is, you don't have to rehydrate it with water. So imagine rehydrating that zucchini with chicken broth.
Yeah.
Or something.
Or something else.
Well,
You can do it.
freeze-dried meat.
You can freeze dry meat,
and
so you take
rehydrate
a
it with your marinade solution.
yeah,
Oh.
Worcestershire sauce,
Yeah.
Juice or
whatever.
something to make it taste
Very interesting. Yeah, it opens up a lot of doors.
There's a lot of fun to be had.
So so besides the initial cost, how much power does that thing pull?
It uses a decent amount of power. So we have pretty cheap electric here.
Yeah.
But I can tell you on ours, we've estimated that the average batch costs between $2 and $6, depending on how long of a batch it is.
Case of peaches was from one load.
One thing.
And then there was more. This isn't all of it. We ate some of them.
Yeah.
And we put some of them in Mylar bags.
Right.
Just because the peaches don't shrink.
But what I would
But
challenge people when they say it's so expensive to run. Okay, well if you're water bathing, you're boiling water on your stove or on a propane. So you're using electricity, you're using natural gas, you're using propane. The other thing you can do when you're using jars, these are all flats that have already been used. These are not new flats. The lids.
Okay.
So you don't have to use new ones every time. Those things aren't expensive, or aren't cheap, excuse me.
Yeah.
So once you pop one that you've used on maybe your green beans or your tomato sauce, we save them. You technically aren't supposed to reuse those in canning, but you can reuse them on your freeze-dried food. So
And we keep the rims on all the freeze-dried food to make sure that stays. Because when you're on the canned items, you can see there's no rims on them because you don't want that false seal.
Yes, yeah. So people do that so that they know
So
it's
you know
truly
it's stayed
sealed.
But with these, like even when we vacuum seal them, sometimes they fail, and it's not worth losing your food because it doesn't matter if this isn't sealed. It matters that the lid is on because it's a freeze-dried product, so it's it's shelf stable whether it's open or closed. And if they come, if the lid popped off completely, it would be ruined. The only other thing I would mention about this room is that we're clearly not in a basement. Lots of people think they can't do this unless they have a basement or a cellar. And we've been using this room for this purpose for 5 years.
Okay.
And the food doesn't go bad. It's a little warm for it in the summer. I've got a thermometer right here. It says it's 76. So it's about as hot as it gets in here. And in the winter, it gets cold enough that sometimes we have to run a space heater because we don't want anything to freeze. And if it's below zero outside, we'll have things on the floor that will freeze.
Oh, wow.
So we have to keep the food up off the floor and the floor runs around.
Don't listen to people that say you have to have a cellar, you have to have a basement. Anybody can start preserving food.
Darkness is more important than cool temperatures.
By far.
For canned foods. If you wanted to keep these pumpkins here all winter, they would do a lot better in 50 degrees and or fresh onions, fresh potatoes.
And that stuff.
This room runs a little bit warmer than the rest of our house, which is why our potatoes and onions are in our dining room. That's right by the thermostat. It stays cooler and
in a suburban home or anything and has a little garden, if you think you can't preserve food because you don't have a place to store it, if you want to try to preserve it for a decade, well maybe, but if you're preserving it to have fresh food, healthy food to eat over the winter, go for it. Yeah.
Nice.
Don't let that be an excuse.
Yeah, people look at this a lot of times and are, how long is this going to last you? And I'm like, hopefully about 10 months. We don't want it to last longer than that. And that's the food we put in the jars, we want to eat it all in the year and then put it back, new food, in the next year. And then sometimes we won't have as good of a harvest of something, and it's nice to have we always have a little extra tomato sauce because I don't want to run out of that. So we'll use that first, even after we start putting up new tomato sauce.
In meal prep in the winter, it'll come in. I'm gonna do sweet potatoes, some onions, some squash, and some green beans. Take all 4 of these, hydrate them, strain them, and put a little lard or olive oil or whatever in the skillet and.
Easy.
But to get through spring when we're so busy planting and
we need something fast.
We come in, we're exhausted, and you want a healthy meal. Rehydrating.
You don't have to spend all that time chopping and appealing.
Smart. I like that.
And when you're making soup, the other thing, when you're making like soup, you take the zucchini or green beans, whatever you're putting in your soup, you don't even have to rehydrate it. You just dump it in, and it's going to
already
rehydrate
warm.
in the broth.
Like we made early season salsa this year with our first tomatoes, and we didn't have peppers yet. So these are pre-chopped sweet peppers, all ready from last September.
And
I just dumped them in there.
Peppers and onions, I don't rehydrate them. I'll mix them into the meat the raw meat, and it's going to rehydrate with the juices that are in the raw meat as it cooks.
Yummy.
Yeah.
Come on. That is cool.
Yeah.
I
And
just
there are
I didn't
people who
realize.
we freeze dry chili and like other pre-cooked. So we have some like chicken.
Curry that I made.
Yeah, like you can just put the
Yeah.
whole soup or pre-made whatever. We have some veggie beef stew that we freeze dried, and then you take it out and you put it in your bowl and you pour your hot water in. You have to let it hydrate. Beans take a while, so the chili
Okay.
could take longer to rehydrate.
That
I
makes
really
sense.
think we need to start doing
Yeah.
it like overnight or something. Yeah, because they take a long time to soak.
You
that
gotta
up,
pre-soak them for a while.
but it's like it's worth it.
Yeah.
Like, have the food.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
make a big pot. We make big meals with a big family, and
Right.
we get too much. As long as I've got a tray full, a freeze dryer tray, which is
One of those, yeah.
this is the size of the tray.
Yeah.
Large.
As long as I've got enough to fill this tray, then leftovers can just go in the freeze dryer, and
So even a liquid like a broth,
yeah,
it's like it's a bunch of liquid on there, and then,
Yeah. This
then you
holds-
scrape it off, and then
yeah,
okay.
liquid. This holds just
And
over
it
a
actually,
quart.
the broth